in the second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chopra, while the CFPB director is now finally removable by the president, the CFPB remains unaccountable to Congress in the sense that it's not subject to the appropriations process. In a 2016 interview at the University of Pennsylvania, you were asked about proposals for making the CFPB subject to appropriations or making it a 5-person commission. At the time, you said that congressmen who vote for these policies must be perceived as, quote, shilling for predatory lenders, end quote, and that, quote, supporting gutting the CFPB like that by starving it of resources or creating structures that don't allow it to do its job, there's no real good argument for it other than representing those who are essentially breaking the law, end quote. Well, in fact, Mr. Chopra, I and many of my colleagues have long and continue to support the policies of the ability to remove a CFPB director by the president, making it accountable to Congress by making it subject to appropriations. And for me, it's about accountability. So let me ask you, is it still your view that my colleagues and I just want to shill for, quote, predatory lenders and represent lawbreakers?
No, Senator, but when it comes to the banking regulators, the comptroller of the currency.
I just want to be clear that so you are retracting what you said back in 2016?
I'm happy to look at that. If I said that, I think many people's concerns about accountability are principled, and it is certainly not the case that everyone is just doing the bidding. I regret that if I said that. But ultimately, I do believe that independent agencies are able to stay more clear of political influence, are able to exercise judgment carefully, and the comptroller of the currency and others, I do believe that
I understand that you could disagree with the opinion and the conclusion about the best mechanism for accountability, but I'm glad to hear that you are retracting the impugning of the motives of those of us who feel as we do. And I'd be happy to provide the video for you if you have a question about whether that's accurate. Let me ask you this. Last year, the CFPB affirmed that supervisory guidance does not have the force or effect of law. And this year, it issued a rule to codify that principle. So I certainly welcome this commitment to the rule of law, especially in light of the CFPB's troubling past practice of taking enforcement action based on supervisory guidance. I think in our previous conversation, you agreed that with this step taken by the CFPB, I just want to be clear, are you committing to complying with this law, with this rule, or do you intend to revisit and attempt to change this rule that was passed this year to codify that principle?
Yeah, so Senator, I appreciate the question. Guidance does not have, cannot impose obligations. That is not the appropriate way in which new laws are created, or it is outside of the regulatory process. I understand your concerns, but I have not read that rule very specifically. But supervisory guidance is really supposed to be there to help institutions be able to understand how to best comply. It can cover sometimes emerging issues that provide guidance.
Yeah, no,
but I agree with.
This is about sticking with the rule that codifies the principle that guidance can't act as a rule. My last question here has to do with the indirect auto lending. This was an egregious example of the CFPB's enforcement crusade. And it specifically relied on a very controversial disparate impact theory, and it was issued by a supervisory bulletin rather than a proper rule. The GAO confirmed that the CFPB's bulletin functioned as a rule and was therefore subject to the Congressional Review Act. And Congress, as you know, overturned this misguided policy. Now, when you and I spoke last week, I asked you if you intended to reopen the issue that Congress had closed through the CRA and create some new version of an auto lending rule premised on the disparate impact theory. And I think you said you committed to me that you would not do that. Did I have that right? And will you confirmed that commitment today.
The Congressional Review Act resolution has nullified that guidance document, and the CFPB will continue to adhere to that if I'm confirmed. And I will continue to monitor any of these concerns you have to work with you further. But that has been nullified, and that is now the law.